A rider zips into his jacket the exact same way every single time. Sleeve first, then collar, then gloves. Like he's running a checklist only he can see. At the next pump over, another rider's eyes flick to his mirror every couple of seconds, almost like a tick. And out on the road behind them, a third rider pulls away from a group of 6 friends, alone, on purpose, even though he was invited. From the outside, none of this looks like anything, just habits. Small, repetitive, maybe a little obsessive. What they actually are is something else. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why 5 ordinary motorcycle habits are quietly training your brain to handle stress, fear, and pressure better than most people ever learn to. And the 5th one is the one almost no rider realizes they're doing for that very reason. For a long time, psychologists treated mental toughness the way people treat height, something you either had or didn't. Newer research on resilience says that's backwards. Toughness isn't a trait you're issued at birth. It's mostly a byproduct of specific, repeated behaviors, small doses of controlled stress that teach the nervous system how to handle the real thing when it shows up. Riders build 5 of these habits constantly without ever meaning to. Most of them think they're just being careful. They're actually in training, and none of it looks like training at all. Here's the strange part. None of these 5 habits will sound dramatic. That's exactly why almost nobody notices what they're doing. Habit 1, the gear up ritual. Watch an experienced rider get ready and you'll notice the exact same sequence every single time. Jacket, gloves, helmet, chin strap, mirror check. Interrupted halfway through, and a surprising number of riders will start over from the beginning rather than skip a step. Sports psychologists have studied this kind of behavior for years in surgeons and elite athletes, and they have a name for it: a pre-performance routine. The finding shows up again and again. A fixed sequence performed right before a high-stakes moment measurably lowers anxiety and sharpens focus because it gives the brain an unmistakable signal that the moment has officially started. Here's the part most people miss. The ritual was never superstition. It's a rehearsed on switch. Most of us walk straight from a distracted, scattered state into something demanding our full attention with zero transition in between. No wonder it feels chaotic every time. The rider running the same 5 steps before every ride has quietly built something most people never bother to build on purpose: a reliable way to tell their own mind, on command, that it's time to focus. The gear was never really the point. The sequence was training the switch. 1 down, 4 to go, and the next habit looks a lot like nervousness right up until you know what it's actually doing. Habit 2, the hazard scan. Every few seconds, a trained rider's eyes move on their own. Mirror, road ahead, blind spot, brake lights, gap in traffic, mirror again. Watch it happen from the passenger seat and it can look almost anxious, like they're bracing for something bad. It's the opposite. Researchers who study attention have drawn a clear line between reactive hypervigilance, the kind that comes from anxiety, and trained proactive scanning, the kind that comes purely from repetition. One wears you down, the other calms you because you're rarely caught off guard by anything. This is the part that tends to surprise people. Constantly scanning for what could go wrong, done on purpose and with skill, doesn't create more stress. It removes the stress of being blindsided by it. A rider who has spent years reading traffic before it becomes a problem carries that same instinct straight into the rest of their life without noticing. They clock tension in a meeting before it turns into an argument. They catch a bad mood building before it turns into a bad day. From the outside, it looks like watching for danger. What it actually is staying 2 steps ahead of it, and the difference between those 2 things is enormous. 2 down. The next habit is the habit riders get judged for the most, and it might be the one doing the most work. Habit 3, riding solo. Every group of riders has one person who peels off alone more often than the rest. No group chat, no planned stop, just them, the bike, and whatever decision the road hands them next. Psychologists who study self-efficacy, the belief that you can actually handle what's in front of you, have found that belief doesn't come from being told you're capable. It comes from proof, specifically from remembering a moment you solved a real problem with nobody else around to hand it to. That is exactly what a solo ride manufactures again and again. A road closes and there's no one to ask, so you reroute yourself. The weather turns ugly and there's no one to follow, so the call is yours alone. Every one of those small decisions gets filed away as evidence, and evidence is what real confidence is built from, not encouragement. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most people avoid exactly this kind of moment. They call a friend, check 5 reviews, wait for somebody else to decide first. The solo writer does the opposite by habit and walks away with something no pep talk can fully replace, a memory of having actually handled it completely alone. 3 down, and this next one looks the most like a mistake right up until you understand what it's rewiring. Habit 4. Riding through bad weather. Ask a longtime rider about their worst ride, and they usually don't describe the most dangerous one. They describe the coldest, wettest, most miserable one they didn't turn back from. Researchers who study discomfort and emotional regulation have found that people who voluntarily put themselves through manageable hardship, cold, physical strain, unpleasant conditions they could have avoided, tend to develop a noticeably higher tolerance for distress in general. Their nervous system quietly updates its threshold for what counts as unbearable because it keeps collecting evidence that discomfort is temporary and survivable. That doesn't mean discomfort should be chased for its own sake, but it does explain something odd. A rider who has pushed through a genuine downpour tends to handle a brutal week at work differently than someone who hasn't, not because the two things are equally hard, but because their body has already rehearsed the feeling of enduring something unpleasant and coming out the other side intact. The rain was never really the point either. It was proof, delivered straight to the nervous system, that hard is not the same thing as dangerous, and uncomfortable is not the same thing as unbearable. 4 down, last one, and this is the habit with almost nothing to do with riding itself, which is exactly why it matters most. Habit 5, the silent minute after. Here's the one almost nobody names, because it doesn't look like a habit at all. The bike gets parked, the engine goes quiet, and before the helmet even comes off, a lot of riders just sit there for a minute, doing what looks like absolutely nothing. Performance researchers who study reflection have found that people who pause and mentally process an intense experience immediately after it happens, instead of rushing straight into the next task, show better emotional regulation and noticeably less lingering stress than people who don't. Researchers have a term for it: closing the loop. Without that pause, the brain treats the experience as unfinished and quietly keeps running it in the background. This is the part that tends to surprise even riders who've done it for years without ever naming it. That quiet minute in the driveway isn't rest, it's the brain replaying the near miss at that one intersection, filing away the good line through the last corner, finishing the story before it's allowed to start the next one. Most people never get this minute. They go straight from a stressful commute into a meeting, from an argument into dinner, one unfinished moment stacked on the last, then wonder by 9 at night why they still feel wired for no reason. The rider sitting in the driveway for 60 seconds, saying absolutely nothing, might be doing more for their mental health in that single minute than they did during the entire ride. 5 habits. Not one of them was designed to build a stronger mind. A ritual that switches focus on command. A scan that trades anxiety for readiness. A solo ride that turns decisions into proof. A rainstorm that raises the bar for what counts as unbearable. A quiet minute that finishes what the ride actually started. Nobody builds these 5 habits on purpose. They get built by accident, ride after ride, simply because they happen to be the same habits that keep a rider alive out there. The mental toughness was never the goal, it was only ever the side effect. So take another look at that list. Which one have you been doing for years without ever realizing what it was actually doing for you? Tell us which habit hit closest to home in the comments, and if riding has ever gotten you through something harder than bad weather, we'd love to hear that story too.